Every moment of every day, your heart is having a conversation with your brain. Every human heart, around the heart, is a field of energy, 5 to 8 feet, 2 to 3 meters diameter. And this field of energy can be measured now in ways that make it very useful to us. The Institute of Heart Math has designed equipment that will help us to measure this field. Every moment of every day, your heart is sending signals to your brain, telling your brain what kind of energy to send to your body. Every moment of every day, there is a signal from your heart to your brain.
What we now know is, when I was in school and when many of our listeners were in school, we were taught that this is a physical reality made of atoms. And our atoms would look like little solar systems. They were modeled as little solar systems, things in the middle called a nucleus with other things orbiting them like electrons. And those days are long gone. We now look at atoms rather than things orbiting around other things. We look at them as concentrations of energy in space and time, where there are no clear-cut things. Now, where this gets important is that scientists, and this is in the standard physics textbooks, this is no surprise what I'm about to say, is that if you change the field of energy that the atom lives in, you change the atom. You can change that field electrically, or you can change it magnetically. And there are terms for the effects. The Zeeman effect, the Stark effect are well-documented effects of electrical and magnetic changes in the field that change the atom. Or, while it sounds technical and maybe not relevant, where it gets really relevant very fast, is our hearts are the strongest bioelectrical and magnetic field generators in our bodies. Our hearts generate stronger electrical fields than our brains. They generate stronger magnetic fields than our brains. Our hearts are 5,000 times as powerful magnetically than our brains. And we hear about EKGs of our hearts. They're up to 100 times stronger than the EEG, the electrical information in our brains. So when we create thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, compassion, prayers of forgiveness in our hearts, that's the words that we call those experiences. But to the field, what we're doing is we're creating electrical and magnetic waves in here that are now known to change the stuff out here. And in that way, we are linked. It's not that our feeling changed something in this three-dimensional world. Rather, our feelings are speaking to the blueprint in the higher dimensions, and we're seeing the shadow of that change in our physical world. The father of quantum physics, Max Planck, actually said that the matter that we see in our world doesn't exist. It says the stuff we're made out of doesn't even exist, and the world that we see doesn't exist the way we believe it does. What he said was, what we see as matter is here because of the existence of what he called a conscious and intelligent mind. And these are his precise words. And he followed that statement by saying that underlying this mind is the matrix of all matter. And this is the coin he termed in 1944. Of course, the movie series was based on the studies that came afterward, but it's actually been around since the mid-20th century. I was trained as a scientist, and in my training there was never an allowance for the possibility this field could exist. So this field, the matrix, is the field of intelligent, non-conventional energy. It doesn't work the way electricity or broadcast energy works. And perhaps that's one of the reasons it's taken so long for science to catch up, because our equipment isn't built to detect this kind of energy. Our feelings are speaking to the blueprint in the higher dimensions, and we're seeing the shadow of that change in our physical world. As a matter of fact, in the last 100 years, science has missed the mark twice in terms of their explanation, the story that science gives of how our world works. And we're now paying the price for where science got it wrong, essentially. And it's coming full circle, it's being corrected. But the first place that this happened was with the belief that the space between things is empty. And now we know that nothing could be further from the truth. There's a lot going on in what we always thought was empty space, but from the experiments that were performed in 1887, very famous Michelson-Morley experiments, to detect whether or not this field was there. When those experiments were interpreted as proving the field wasn't there over 100 years ago, from that point forward, our science has been based in the belief that everything is separate from everything else. What happens in one place doesn't have any effect on anything else. And now we know that these two assumptions are flat wrong. There is something in the nothing, and we do have the ability through our hearts, what is called coherent heart-based emotion, to create the fields in our body. Appears to be a mirror, in that the quantum soup of all possibilities, if you will, that exists as this field will mirror back to us. And what makes it so significant in our lives is the fact that number one, through this field, all matter appears to be connected. And the word that science is using for this connection now is called entanglement. What entanglement suggests is that when something happens in one place in this field, in the divine matrix, it can be in another room next to us, it can be halfway around the world, that the effects of that something can be felt almost everywhere simultaneously. So let me just describe what I mean by that a little bit. There was they took a particle of the stuff our world is made of. It's called a photon, a little packet of light, particle of light, if you will. And they wanted two identical particles. So they took this one photon and they broke it into two, so both pieces had the same properties. And they had a specialized device where they could fire these in opposite directions at the same time, 7 miles for one particle in one direction, 7 miles in the other direction. When they reach their destinations, they're now 14 miles apart. They're using fiber optic cables to do this. And once those particles are at their destination, they can begin the experiments. And what they found was whatever they would do to one particle, in a moment in time, the other one acted like it just had the experience faster than it could have if this one were transmitting the information to the other one. Sometimes this one would act like it was having the experience before this one even finished its experience. They said they were tickling or disturbing the particles. They would change the charge or change the spin rate or force the particle to go take path A or path B. But whatever they were doing over here, this particle always had the identical experience, as if they were still connected even though they were physically separate. And the reason this experiment is so important is it is now demonstrating to the scientific mind what the ancient indigenous traditions have always said, and that is once matter is physically connected, even though it may become separate and distant from where it was originally, it's always linked energetically.